This is a very, very special video. I want to take you with me to this biblical place full of history. See how many sacred things are here. Jornada Infinita has exclusive footage to show you. The tomb of King David, the stone of Isaac's sacrifice, the upper room where Jesus is said to have had the Last Supper with the apostles. I'm here in the waters where the original baptism of Christianity took place, the baptism of Jesus' first teacher. It's really chilling. It's like reliving a biblical prophecy. Once again, the world stops to celebrate the birth of Jesus. Once again, the cities are decorated with trees and gifts, nativity scenes and Santas. But what is at the heart of this celebration? What does it mean for the world? That day when Maria gave birth to the boy who would become known as Jesus of Nazareth and later Jesus Christ? In a special Christmas series, Jornada Infinita will bring 4 different aspects that help us understand the essence of Jesus' message. In this first episode, we will go even further back in time to learn about the prophets who preceded the Master of Nazareth, the patriarch Abraham. It is considered the beginning of Jewish history and therefore also of Christian history. He even appears in the genealogy of Jesus mentioned in the Gospels of Luke and Matthew. Abraham was born in Mesopotamia about 4,000 years ago, traveled to Egypt and then to Canaan before Jerusalem had that name. The Jewish Bible tells us that God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son and he obeyed. The sacrifice of Isaac has always fascinated humanity and ended up becoming an example because Abraham accepted to sacrifice his son in the name of his love for God. A very common interpretation of this episode of Abraham's sacrifice, of this biblical episode, is that it was a test from God for Abraham's faith. When suddenly an angel came from heaven and told Abraham that he could exchange Isaac for a lamb, the human sacrifice would be replaced by an animal sacrifice. For Christians, this episode is also understood as a metaphor. A parallel is made there with the episode of the sacrifice of Jesus himself, the Son of God, sacrificing himself to save humanity. We're going to go in there, look inside the Dome of the Rock, the Islamic sanctuary, which is also the place where the sacred stone is, the stone of the sacrifice of Isaac. Today, what you see here behind me is the Dome of the Rock, a sanctuary built by the Muslims at the end of the 7th century when they conquered Jerusalem. But it was built right on top of where Solomon's temple used to be, which we estimate was built approximately 2,900 to 3,000 years ago. And there it was built right on top of the stone of Isaac's sacrifice, where tradition said it was the stone of Isaac's sacrifice. That was also where the sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, the most sacred place was. That's where the Hebrews, when they arrived here and settled in Jerusalem, placed the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark that was also the dwelling place of God, where the 10 Commandments were kept, the tablets that God gave to Moses, the commandments that have lasted until today. They were kept inside there, and that's why this place became so sacred. And an interesting fact about this place is that, according to director Steven Spielberg, the Ark of the Covenant ended up in a warehouse of the American Army. That's in the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark. This one right here, guys. It's the Dome of the Chain, the oldest structure that exists on the esplanade of the Temple Mount. There's a version that says it was built as a kind of model for the Dome of the Rock, which is right next to it. They really are quite similar, but there are other traditions regarding this place, which, by the way, for a while became a Christian chapel when the Crusaders conquered Jerusalem. Here we can still see some remnants of that older construction from the beginning. Look, writings in Arabic, references to the Quran. It's small, but it's very beautiful, and it's right at the entrance to the most sacred place of all, here, where the stone of Abraham's sacrifice is the same stone from which Islamic tradition tells us that Muhammad departed on his night journey to meet with God. We've already discussed the literal interpretation of the sacrifice of Isaac, which ended up not happening, as an episode that proved and tested Abraham's faith. We've already talked about the symbolic aspect as something that preceded and even prepared for the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross. We discussed the event's historical significance, but I believe we should also consider a psychological perspective. The episode of the sacrifice of Isaac would be Abraham facing his own fears, his own anxieties, something that all of us have to face all the time. Abraham faces his fears, faces anxiety, and at the same time fulfills God's will. It's an episode that makes us reflect on our own lives, on what frightens us, on what scares us. Our fears, even if they're small, sometimes we have to deal with them every day. Whether you interpret this powerful episode as a historical event or a spiritual allegory, the fact is that the story of Abraham and Isaac here on Mount Moriah continues to captivate people and stir strong emotions. Heated debates arise not only among followers of the major Abrahamic religions, Christians, Jews, and Muslims, but especially among scholars. The sacrifice of Isaac continues to inspire people of all cultures and beliefs, bringing many people to this place. Abraham's obedience and his unwavering faith were rewarded with God's promise. He would be the father of a great nation, and his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the grains of sand on the seashore. King David to this day is the most celebrated figure in Judaism. A warrior who became king, he ruled Israel during one of its most prosperous periods, when the 12 tribes were unified. That's why, 1,000 years later, in the time of Jesus, it was believed that the Messiah had to be a descendant of David. The Gospels make two important connections between Jesus and David. The Messiah would have been born in the same city as the king, Bethlehem of Judea, and would be his descendant. In present-day Jerusalem, two sacred places, one connected to Jesus and the other to King David, are located in the same building. Today, Infinite Journey is going to climb a very sacred mountain, a mountain so important that it is intertwined with Israel itself. It's no wonder that Israel is also called Zion. See how many sacred things are here. Us. Right here next to me is the tomb of King David, which according to one tradition is the tomb of King David. And in the same complex on the second floor, the upper room where Jesus is said to have had the Last Supper with the apostles. I would like to invite you to come with me into the place where tradition says is the tomb of King David. The Book of Kings in the Jewish Bible, which for Christians is the Old Testament, states it very clearly. David slept with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. Until the 19th century, archaeologists believed that David's palace, and therefore the city of David, was located at this point here at the top of Mount Zion. More recently, new discoveries have led us to another place, a little farther from here, closer to the temple. But Israeli archaeologists have no idea where that tomb might be. There are many tombs scattered throughout the city of David, but this is a place that tradition understands to be, at least symbolically, the tomb of David. That's why many Orthodox Jews pray here daily. However, all the signs here, including this one, tell us that King David's tomb is here. But look, there's an important detail. According to a medieval tradition, that's where we understand that it's a tradition and not an archaeological certainty. By the way, the very location of Mount Zion has raised many doubts throughout history. We don't even know for sure if it was here. In this complex, there used to be a Franciscan monastery here, which was closed in 1551. But the tradition that says King David's tomb is here dates back to the 10th century during the Middle Ages. It's no coincidence that the Crusaders were the ones who built part of this complex. Get ready, I think I'm about to blow your mind. Tradition tells us that Christians in the Middle Ages learned from the Muslims that this would have been the place of Jesus' Last Supper, and because of that, Christians would have also identified King David's tomb here. Notice how the three religions constantly mix in Jerusalem. Traditions constantly replace one place with another. One takes over for a time, then another later. Now everyone is here. We often see Jews and Christians. So, this complex here, which has very little or nothing archaeological about it, I would say nothing. It has a lot of tradition, and faith is something we don't discuss in here. I'm going to show you now how God acts, fervently praying in front of King David's tomb. The sarcophagus here was built by the Crusaders, the Christians who came here to retake Jerusalem after the Arab conquest. We know the importance that King David has always had for Christianity, because the Messianic tradition says that Christ should be a descendant of King David. This tomb placed here has no archaeological evidence, but it holds a lot of symbolism and tradition here. It's no wonder that Orthodox Jews pray here every day. The walls, in fact, belong to a Christian church that used to be here. Now, what stands out the most about this place is that down here we have what is believed to be King David's tomb, and upstairs, the room where Jesus is said to have had the Last Supper with the apostles. Another direct connection. This brings us to an important question. Was Jesus really a descendant of King David? Is this a hereditary royal or symbolic matter? The authors of the Gospels of Luke and Matthew trace different genealogies to show that the lineage of King David leads to Jesus. From Nazareth. Matthew starts from Abraham, while Luke goes all the way back to Adam. The prophecies about the coming of a Messiah, a descendant of King David, were known in the time of Jesus. That being so, for the evangelists, tracing the ancestry of Jesus, linking him by blood to King David, was a way to show that the messianic prophecies were fulfilled in him, were fulfilled in Jesus. They pray in front of a Torah scroll, the sacred scroll of Judaism. And the idea that the Old Testament is revived every day down here is associated with the idea that up there on the second floor of the house, the New Testament is revived by the pilgrims. This place has always been tense over the centuries. It is an important point of convergence between the Muslim, Jewish, and Christian faiths. But as we always stand for respect for all forms of religion and tolerance, I prefer to hope that the visitors and pilgrims who travel to the cenacle or the tomb of David leave here as I do, very interested and amazed by the historical richness and also filled with positive energy no matter what the visitor's faith is. Our journey continues. We leave Jerusalem for the Dead Sea, advancing to 600 years before Christ. We are introduced to the prophecy of Ezekiel, who prophesied that one day the Temple of Jerusalem would be rebuilt. What happened? It also said the Dead Sea would one day have life, which has not happened yet. These waters, he told me, flow toward the eastern region. They go down the Jordan plain, and they will pour into the sea, so that its waters will become healthier. Everywhere the stream goes, every creature that moves in the water will be able to live, and there will be a great number of fish there. Everything that this water touches will become sound and healthy, and everywhere the stream goes, there will be life. Today, Jornada Infinita came here to the shore of the Dead Sea. We are more than 400 meters below sea level. I want to take you with me to this biblical and also very scientific place full of history. There is so much meaning, so many events here at the Dead Sea, Sodom and Gomorrah in that direction. King David, with the big problem he had back then more than 3,000 years ago with King Saul, came to hide here at the spring of En-Gedi. Masada is right nearby us, where the whole story of the Jews who were surrounded by the Romans took place, a tragic story that ended in mass suicide. There's something next to it. I've talked about this place a lot. Qumran, the ruins of Qumran, an ancient fortress where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. Something that teaches us a lot about Jesus because the Essenes who lived there were contemporaries of Jesus. And everything leads us to believe that Jesus spent some time with the Essenes, got to know them, and was influenced by them. I'm already reaching new ground here, and I really like this place. I'm fascinated by the Dead Sea, fascinated. Bathing here feels like cleansing your soul. We've reached this point. Here, I'm not sure. Do you know what the smell is here? The smell of sulfur that comes from inside the earth? There are even some of these holes here where there are baths, some hot springs. The pure smell, sulfur. "31% salt in this water is 9 times more than the salt in an ocean. But you know what's good about it? That we can float on top of it? Here you go. You know the famous white sand of Itapua Beach in Bahia? This one is even whiter, huh? This isn't sand. This is pure salt. Want some for lunch? It's easy and very salty. I'm dying to get into this water. These minerals that keep accumulating here. We can see each one has a color. You know what that is? When the color changes, it's the change of season. We can track the passage of time here by the lines of minerals. And do you know who they say used to come here too? Cleopatra. That's right. They say she used to come here to take mineral baths to make her skin more beautiful. And Cleopatra, according to legend, that she came here was so enchanted by all of this that she set up a kind of spa here, a center for skin and beauty treatments. It's 4:30 here. The sun is already going down and I'm dying to get into this water so I won't wait any longer. No, I'm going in now before the sun goes down because it'll get cold afterwards. Just so you know, that's Jordan over there, already a different country. The Dead Sea divides Israel and Jordan. All of this used to be sea. The sea turned into dry land, just like the old prophecy of Antonio Conselero said back in Bahia in Canudos, and then the prophecy goes on to say that the dry land will turn into sea. Could it be that this sea, which today has no life and only has salt, that is slowly shrinking because the waters of the Jordan no longer come here or come very little? They're being diverted for irrigation to drink, and all this salt is forming. Will the prophecy come true one day? Will there ever be fish in the Dead Sea again one day? These are the mysteries of this magical sacred place. And that connects me so deeply with nature. I think this place is amazing. The water that returns, water that springs from within the earth and flows, look in the direction of the Dead Sea. A constant flow? As if there were a communication between the interior of the earth and here where we are, a vision very much from the principles of Christianity. It's as if hell down there in the interior of the earth where the devil burns in flames was sending news up here, sending sulfur to a Brazilian like me. The prophecy of Ezekiel quickly reminds us of the preachings of Antonio Conselero back in the backlands of Canudos in Bahia, when he created a community to oppose the Republic. Antonio Conselero wanted a monarchy. He didn't want change. He wanted everything to stay as it was before. He entrenched himself there, and he used to say, the backlands will turn into sea and the sea will turn into backlands. It's a duel of prophets, with Brazilian prophet Conselero claiming the backlands will become sea and the sea will turn into backlands. Ezekiel, the biblical prophet, said that this sea that is dead, that was once dead, will one day be full of life. Prophecy is the desire for change, and that's what this Dead Sea tells us here. In which prophet, in which religion, in which faith is there not the desire for change? The idea that if this life here is hard, if your life is tough, mine is tough too, don't you think so? We want there to be a better one. It has to be after this one, or it can be now. And there nearby, in a river that flows into the Dead Sea, in the famous and mighty Jordan River, a great prophet was attracting crowds even before Jesus began his preaching. They say that John the Baptist fed on honey and locusts, and it's certain that he used running water to baptize his disciples. One day Jesus showed up there. Our connection with water is primordial, vital. Water is a fundamental element that makes up a large part of who we are. To me, it makes perfect sense that we return to it from time to time. Baptism in the history of Christianity is a ritual as ancient as it is fascinating. A founding ritual that was already present at the very beginning of Jesus' preaching, but even before Christianity itself. In Judaism, whether in running water or not, baptism was a widely used ritual, a cleansing of the body and at the same time the purification of the soul. Unlike Christian baptism, which generally speaking is unique and happens only once in Judaism, the idea is to place a person in a ritual bath. The mikveh, as they are known here, even appear in many archaeological excavations. This idea is routine. A person can and should take this ritual bath several times throughout their life. It is necessary to be clean and purified to participate in social life. And I'm now going to a place that's quite well known in the Christian tradition, a place of purification. Look at it, the Jordan River. The first sacrament, what happens to every Christian? When is he presented to the community? He is baptized. The Christian covenant occurs through baptism, and to understand Jesus' origins, this is the best place to start. It's from here that the baptism we know today will emerge, and it's natural that he wanted to be baptized by John the Baptist. Here we can think about what became known as the lost years of Jesus, where Jesus was during the lost years. We don't have any proof that Jesus was here with the Essenes, none at all, but we have to be sure that Jesus met the Essenes, that in some way he lived with them, especially because John the Baptist, being an Essene, the first teacher of Jesus, the one who baptizes Jesus, is an Essene. The strength of John the Baptist was so great that Jesus will never forgive those who ruled there in Jerusalem, but especially Herod Antipas for having beheaded the first teacher of Jesus. At this point here, practically virgin, with no trace of civilization, full of birds, there, it's the closest I can get to the time I'm heading to now. 2,000 years ago, it was somewhere here on the Jordan River in the land of Israel where it happened. The encounter that forever changed the history of baptism. On one side, a prophet, a messianic preacher, known as the Son of Light, because that's what the Essenes called themselves, eager to cleanse humans of their sinful practices, wanting the river's waters to wash away each person's sins. Eager to cleanse the humans who came in droves to this place of their sins, using running water for both spiritual and physical cleansing. A kind of healer, a wise man, a miracle worker, one of the most charismatic leaders of his time. His name is John the Baptist. He baptizes his followers in the waters of the Jordan River, the city, while waiting for the arrival of someone in the city, someone who has already been announced by the prophets, who will be greater than him, someone who will be exalted and will die, to save from eternal fire those who are pure and good. John used baptism as the central sacrament in his messianic movement. And I can imagine John here somewhere in this river dressed, as we've been told, in camel skins. Like someone who left civilization behind and now feeds on honey and locusts. Receiving a crowd, people who heard about him and went on adventures through the deserts, traveling for days and days to be baptized, seeking healing. Here, John plunging one person's head after another into the water, a gesture that's even a bit violent. That's how the idea of what John the Baptist's baptism was like comes to us. A baptism that's a bit different from the one performed by churches, by most Christian churches. In baptismal fonts, since there's no running water there. And also different, but with some similarities to the baptism of certain Protestant denominations, who believe that not the child but an older person should choose whether to be baptized or not. People chose baptism by John the Baptist here. Jesus began preaching only after John the Baptist's death. We have two hypotheses. Either Jesus stayed with John the Baptist all this time, or Jesus didn't feel ready yet to do what that great prophet was doing. Jesus at various moments reminds us of the thinking of the Essenes, the thinking of those priests who were here. When Jesus begins his preaching, he eliminates what perhaps the Essenes did not see. But today we will see, like the impurities of the sons of light, which was first the segregation of women, Jesus will bring women into the group. It's as if the first moment of Christianity was a renewal of the Essene rituals, of the Essene rules, which would be widely used at the beginning of Christianity. So what's the issue with that? I understand some people may see it as a problem, believing everything about Jesus should be original. It should be the first time. But we also know that the preaching of love for your neighbor already existed here in this community. Jesus will amplify this. He will take it to the maximum level. He will do something very difficult, which is to confront the powerful and face death in the name of continuing to preach this message of love. But he had teachers too. He studied the Old Testament. He knows the prophecies like few others. He goes to the synagogues. Recently, the synagogue of Magdala was found. And there Jesus certainly went. He certainly read the Torah there and presented his thoughts, his message. Every time he went to the synagogues. Because he studied, because if he hadn't studied, he wouldn't even be respected. Christianity will forever keep many of the values of the Essenes and will also keep some characteristics that they consider fundamental. The priest should not get married. His dedication must be entirely to God. He cannot devote himself to worldly things. He needs to be fully dedicated to God, to the study of the scriptures, to the knowledge of everything that Judaism brought, and in the case of Christianity, everything that came after Jesus. When we think about where Jesus might have lived during those years, those 18 years at least, about which we have no information, he probably passed through here at some point. It may not have happened when he was 12, 13, or 14. It could have been later. Consider that Jesus likely spent much more than one day with John the Baptist. How many years could Jesus have been with John the Baptist? In the Jordan River. Again, Jesus starts preaching after the death of John and continues until the end. He is very saddened by the death of Master John. John the Baptist will speak. God sent me to show you the truth of the law, through which you will be spared from having many masters and will no longer have mortal masters, but only the Most High who sent me. The long-awaited visitor is now arriving. I imagine he comes with a dry mouth, calloused feet after a long walk through the desert. After all, he left Galilee. It was a young Nazarene who comes here with aching feet and a great purpose. He left his past and family behind and comes here to meet a great rabbi, John the Baptist, who baptizes in running water, living water, so that people may repent of their sins and return to the divine path before death comes to surprise them. I can imagine the newcomer settling in among the pilgrims, John the Baptist's disciples, to hear him speak about God's final judgment, the struggle between good and evil, and the destruction of the unjust. I can hear John's powerful voice echoing along the riverbanks and the visitor approaching, still without saying a word, getting ready to be baptized himself as well. When the visitor finally starts approaching John and introduces himself to him, does John immediately recognize the one who will one day heal people, perform miracles, and even raise the dead? And more than anything, who will preach a message of unconditional love that will spread throughout the world, making the apprentice, that man named Jesus, even greater than his master, the prophet John the Baptist. The Gospels tell us that, yes, John the Baptist saw before him the Lamb of God who would take away the sins of the world. But the Gospels would be written many decades later, and there won't be a single source that can guarantee us exactly what happened at that very symbolic moment. It was only in the Middle Ages that the West began to consider baptism by infusion, the one where the child receives water over the head, as a substitute for the baptism that Jesus began here with John in the Jordan River, baptism by immersion, the one where we go into the water alone or are immersed by someone in the water. It came to be traditionally associated with the time Jesus spent inside his tomb, the immersion into the depths of our existence. At the time when they say that Jesus went to hell to save the sins of humanity, and the return, the moment when Jesus reappears resurrected, the beginning of a new life for Christianity, the beginning of a new covenant with God. Since I am here in the waters where the original baptism of Christianity took place, I will take advantage of this privilege to purify myself once again in the waters of the Jordan River. After this bath, I come out of the water feeling purified and renewed as well. Water, especially running water, washes away what we have that's bad inside us. It cleanses our bodies and also our souls. We should understand the reason behind the rituals. It's not just about pouring water. When you go through a purification ritual like this, something has to happen inside you as well. That's my main takeaway from this experience. In this beautiful evening here at the Jordan River, full of birds with the sun setting, ending such a beautiful day, carrying so much inside me. In the next episode of the Infinite Journey Christmas special, we'll go together to Galilee,